Today we're going to go over how we set up the dash layout in Truck Norris, starting with our AEM 3-gauge Infinity VDM US layout that's available when you download the latest version of DashDesign software. I'm going to show you where you can open this up. I'm going to go up a couple tabs here. Let's start from the beginning. So in your AEM folder, in your My Documents, your DashDesign, Setups, Generic, and it's going to be this second one down from the top here. We'll reopen this just to show you, and now I'm going to go ahead and show you how we modified this template to look like the one that was seen in the video. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change these needle colors on these pages. We're going to double click, I'm going to pick our color here, set it as orange, and we're going to do this for every needle that's present on this screen and subsequent screens. Now sometimes you'll encounter an instance like this where you'll double click on one of these gauges and you can't access this needle here to change color. It says it's already been changed to orange, but that's for the top air-fuel ratio gauge. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit, and we're actually going to select intake manifold pressure here, and that'll allow us to change that one since we can't select it here. We're also going to change the color of our bar graphs, orange. And I'm just going to show you on this first page. It's the same step for all the rest of the pages in this layout. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to assign our channels for what we had on the layout. We had air-fuel ratio here, so we're going to leave that one alone. Engine speed, mile per hour, oil pressure, and water temp. But what we do want to change is this boost here. We're going to change this one to an AFR target gauge. So we're going to double click in here, and we're going to change the label. And now this kind of doesn't seem to fit properly, so we're going to unlock our layout. And we're going to use the arrow keys, and we're going to move this over until it's somewhere that we like it and legible. And then we're going to lock our layout again, because if we accidentally make a change, we can't go back. And we want to make sure that everything we place stays in the same place. So now let's go back into our gauge here, and we're actually going to change this to our AFR target. And in doing so, we need to change these values here, this -15, +15, and 0. So what we're going to do, we're going to come into here and we're going to change our min and max values on this gauge here, because previously it was configured for manifold pressure of -15 and +15 psi. We want to change that to emulate this AFR gauge up above. So we're going to change our start value to 8 and our end value to 16. That's going to let the software know what our start value and end value is. But now we need to go in and actually physically change the labels that are on this gauge here. So we're going to change this one to 8. We're going to change this one to 12. And we will change this one to 16. And what we can do, if we unlock our layout, so after we've unlocked our layout, what we can do is we can come in and we'll select this and we'll copy it. We can actually drag this into position, and we'll change this from 12 to 14, and we'll do the same here, and we'll make this 10. And now that we've added these values, it looks like we need to move our AFR target label. So now that we've done that, let's verify. Okay, so that's the setup for our first page. Let's go on to the second screen. We're going to do the same thing, changing the needle colors to orange. And we're actually going to change this oil temp to fuel pressure, and we're going to change this from oil temp to fuel pressure. We're going to unlock our layout so we can make this look a little nicer. We're going to change this one to AFR Bank 1. Again, we're going to have to shift this over. I'm using the arrow keys to do this. And we're going to assign this to AFR 1. We're going to make this one our AFR target. Now what we're going to do here, these formatting, if you have the pound sign, this means it'll put a number, a decimal point, and a number. So if you look in the instruction manual, we explain there's different ways of formatting this. Like if we put a 0 here instead, it'll round to the nearest 10. Do 9, we'll do whole integers, and a 5 will round to the nearest, 0, 5, 10, 15, etc. We're going to leave this as pound. And one other thing we're going to add to this screen here is we're going to actually add an icon. So we're actually going to unlock our layout. We're going to add a graphic. And we're going to select where we want to place the graphic. And put that right about here. I'm going to double click. And we're going to select our GPS valid channel. So that will let us know when our VDM has acquired a GPS signal. Okay, and now we're going to move on to our, actually going to skip ahead a little bit and go to screen 4. And these have a bunch of numerical values set up for us. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that the vehicle speed channel is actually linked to the GPS speed, not GPSI, that's internal. That's for the CD5 only. We want to use GPS speed. This is coming from our VDM GPS signal. We're going to change a few of these. We're going to change our oil temp to fuel pressure. And now we're going to change our label. We have a degree F for degrees Fahrenheit because it was previously set as a temperature. We're just going to type PSI in here. And leave that as that. And our air-fuel ratio, let's make sure that's assigned to AFR1. It is. Fuel pressure, we're actually going to change to AFR target. And we're going to change that to AFR target as well. And okay, so now our fourth page is all set up. And now we can move on to things like alarms and warnings. And so what we did actually in this layout, I'll continue working on this page here. We set up some warning channels that will illuminate, turn these numerals red in the event that there's a warning. So two ways of doing this. The first way is actually in the channel directly. You can select warning. The only limitation of this is setting it up this way, you only have a greater than or equal to function. So in this particular channel, fuel pressure, we actually want a less than or equal to function. So we're not going to use this method. I'm going to show you the second method, which involves the secondary alarm output function. But first we need to go into our setup display. So we have alarms here, and we're going to go down to the bottom, and we have warning. And alarms are typically used to trigger our alarm page, whereas warnings are used as a indicator that you are approaching a problem. So we're going to go here to our warning, fuel pressure low, and we actually want to set this to the base fuel pressure on this engine was 43 psi, and with a vacuum referenced fuel pressure regulator, we're actually going to see a less than 40 at idle, so we definitely don't want that. We're going to set that to around 20 psi, because again, this engine had the Infinity and it'll compensate for a drop in fuel pressure. We're also going to make this active greater than, let's say, cranking speed, so 500 RPM. We're actually going to eliminate this intake manifold air pressure condition, so it's only going to be triggered if fuel pressure is less than 20 psi and the engine is running. So now that we've set that, we can go back into our fuel pressure numeral readout and we can select the warning mode, and we're going to select our warning fuel pressure low. Now what this will do is this will turn this numerical readout from white to red if we have met those conditions we just set. We can have it either a solid red, we can actually select any color we'd like, or we can make it flash. But typically on numerical readouts, I like to keep those solid, not flashing, so that the driver can see it and read it at any point in time. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with oil pressure and our water temp and our air fuel ratio. So we'll go back into our display here and we're going to go back down to our warnings, and let's go to oil pressure, and we're going to do the same thing. So we want oil pressure less than 20 and engine speed greater than 500. Let's make this 15 just for good measure so we're not triggering it. We're going to do the same thing with coolant temp. We'll set this 210 is a reasonable value. We're going to leave that one alone. And since we don't have a warning for our air fuel, we're going to actually create one of those right now. So we're going to call this channel air fuel lean. And it's going to be an alarm. And our primary input is going to be that AFR1 channel. So we're going to say if our AFR1 channel is greater than 15, we're also going to add a secondary condition. We're going to add engine speed greater than 500 RPM, and we're also going to add throttle position to this one. We want throttle to be greater than, let's say, 40%. So now we've set that warning channel up. Now we can go into each one of these. We can set up our oil pressure. And what's nice about configuring the alarms with this method is any other channel you want to assign the same alarm trigger conditions to, we can simply select this warning condition down here. We don't have to go in and manually configure it each and every time, so that we know that every single channel that is associated with this warning will all activate at the exact same threshold. Okay, now we're going to go into our screen 1 and screen 2, and we're going to do the same thing for our oil pressure and our water temp and our air fuel ratio. So what we can actually do is we can come here and we can actually make the text change color as well. Now this one I will make flash because it's not displaying the numerical readout, it's displaying the text below the numerical readout. So we're going to have this one triggered by our warning oil pressure low, and we're going to do the same thing with water temp. And our air fuel ratio. Now we're going to have to set, this is two different lines of text, so we're going to have to set both independently of one another, but since they're both triggered by the same condition, they will both flash at identical points in time. And let's go ahead and do this on screen 2 as well. So here we have the option of doing either the text or the numerical readout. And for this one, we're going to do the numerical readout. Not going to make it flash. Same thing with fuel pressure. So this one's actually been pre-configured. Previously was coolant temp. So we already had a warning established there. So we want to go in and actually change this to our fuel pressure low warning. And that's another thing to make sure to watch out for when you're changing your layouts. Make sure there's no warnings associated with any channels that you've changed. Otherwise you may have false warnings that are linked to an entirely different channel, or the conditions are just entirely incorrect for what you're displaying. For instance, this fuel pressure was originally coolant temperature, and the warning was only going to be triggered if the value for fuel pressure was greater than 220, and if that's never going to happen on a car. So we want to make sure that we've gone through and actually set up all these channels correctly. And the same thing here with water temp. Same thing with oil pressure. Okay, now we're going to move on to alarms and how we can set up alarms. And this is our warning message here. So let's actually go in and we can scroll down to our warning message. So this says coolant temp here, but when we click on these three dots here, this will actually show us what we have set up that will actually trigger this message down here at the bottom of the screen. So these are all of our warnings that we've used previously to change our channels from white or blue text to red text. And these same warnings will also trigger the text on the bottom of this display. You select your warning input, you actually select what you want displayed. So if you don't want water temp, we can change this to coolant temp. Select our input, our label format, so on and so forth. We have one for battery volts, for fuel pressure, oil pressure. We have a sensor error. So we're actually going to select our warning sensor error and our oil temp. And now that we've done that, and we close this. So let's say we didn't have this text on one of our screens. So now that we've closed and we've opened, we can now see that that water temp has changed to coolant temp. We do the double click, it will actually update. Now if we go to our alarms, we have different alarms that we have. So currently we have one for coolant temp and fuel pressure. And if our coolant temp is greater than 230, it's going to trigger an alarm. And if we have our fuel pressure less than, we're going to change this one to 10, engine speed greater than 500, and we're going to delete this condition here. So now, let's actually go to our alarm page setup. And we actually have alarm conditions that will trigger the alarm page. So we're not going to use the warnings on this one because we have those already configured to make changes on other pages where we've changed the color of text, we've changed the color of numbers, we've made things flash. So we're going to leave those alone. So let's actually open up our alarm screen. And this is our default alarm screen. It's simply a large triangle with the exclamation point in it, as you can see. And this is triggered by, we actually want to change this from our warning message to our alarm message because we want these channels associated with the alarm status, not the warning status. And that about wraps it up. I've shown you how to change the color of needles, how to move things around, how to assign different channels to different gauges, how to set up the alarms and how to set up the warnings, and the various things you can do with that. Signing off.